motion reads, whereas the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996 in its 5th schedule lists education, including curriculum, as a responsibility of the THA, and whereas Tobago subscribes to a national curriculum that originates from the Ministry of Education in Trinidad and that aims to translate national development goals to classroom instruction, and whereas Tobago's environment, history, heritage, governance, and culture can and should be incorporated into the delivery of lessons by respective teachers, and whereas having pupils or students knowledgeable of Tobago's environment, history, heritage, governance, and culture is critical to Tobago's thrusts for greater autonomy and developing its tourism sector among other industries, be it resolved that this House mandates the Division of Education, Innovation, and Energy to construct an appropriately named subject with varying levels, which will specifically incorporate Tobago's environment, history, heritage, culture, and governance. And be it further resolved that beginning in the 2019-2020 academic year, this subject becomes mandatory for all Tobago pupils or students enlisted at government and government-assisted schools between nursery school and the lower secondary school, and be taught using a combination of modern teaching techniques, the arts, and field trips. I indicated, Madam Presiding Officer, that this motion is a Tobago First motion. And I call it a Tobago First motion or Tobago First proposition because the motion requires us to stop and to think about Tobago and Tobago alone. And that's not from an isolationist perspective, but it's from a perspective whereby we ask ourselves, how do we preserve the things we identify as Tobagonian? How do we entrench them? How do we keep them safe while simultaneously participating, actively that is, participating in a broader Trinbago culture? And for everyone in this House, Madam Presiding Officer, I am sure we have experiences whereby when we interact with that which is called Trinbago culture, it is often dominated by a more ubiquitous Trini culture. I'm sure that when we add to the mix globalization and what the CNNization of the world is doing to small cultures, we see even more reason for us to find a way to entrench our cultures, our knowledge of our history and our heritage, and so forth.
We are not at odds with the spirit and the intent of the motion. And therefore, because the prescription we do not think is the fundamental prescription, we would wish to amend the motion. And for us, we have absolutely no difficulty with the preamble, but in respect of the resolution itself, we are suggesting that those resolutions, be it resolved and be it further resolved, be deleted and replaced by the following. 1, be it resolved that the education of our students in Tobago be grounded in the knowledge of and appreciation for the historical, environmental, socio-cultural, and political reality of Tobago. And be it further resolved that the implementation of the curriculum in all our schools reflect effective and deliberate use of resources and stimuli that are based primarily on our Tobago context, but must be sufficiently flexible to incorporate national, regional, and international realities. And with that, Madam Presiding Officer, I beg to move the amendment.
It's indeed a privilege to stand in support of my colleague, my friend, Assemblyman Farley Augustus. Indeed, it is not just a wonderful motion, it's a timely one. And it's not just timely for now. It's a motion that is light years ahead of its time. Brother Farley, you have done well. From where we sit on this side, it may be the angle, but I just cannot see what the other speaker spoke about. We just couldn't comprehend it, as if he was speaking in Latin when he made that resolve and be further resolved statement, something which we will perhaps refer to later on. Allow me to enunciate in this honorable house here today that under the 5th schedule, under part 25, it empowers the THA. It empowers the THA with the responsibility for school curriculum. And I'm using the vernacular. That's what I use. I promise to myself, as my language, and I'll change it. It empowers them to deal with school curriculum when looking at education. And I heard my good friend on the next side speaking. My mind goes back to a biblical story. A man by the name of King Agrippa, who, when having heard Paul spoke with the Spirit, was moved by conviction. And he said, I'm almost persuaded to be a Christian. But as I listened to my good friend on the next side, he seemed to be almost persuaded with conviction, but for they must amend it. But for, I say, if it's not broken, don't fix it. What is wrong with ensuring our children, our youths, and even our adults have a purpose-driven education from the hollowed walls where they are educated?
The curriculum that is administered both at early childhood and infants caters and makes provisions for teaching of Tobago's history, heritage, governance, culture, and of course, the environment. At early childhood level, Madam Presiding Officer, the elements, objectives, and education outcomes are taught through the use of strands that teach our 3 to 5-year-olds about wellness, effective communication, citizenship, intellectual empowerment, and of course, aesthetic expressions. Through the use of the citizenship theme, Madam Presiding Officer, students are engaged and taught about 1, democracy, the value of culture, national pride, religious identity, moral and spiritual values, and respect for self and others, and of course, teaching them appropriate behaviors. The lesson on the aesthetic expressions teach and encourage pupils to begin to develop an appreciation for their culture, both locally and of course, nationally. The children are to be exposed at preschools, of course, 3 to 5 years old, to rhymes, to cultural practices that are indigenous to Tobago, and of course to Trinidad and Tobago. What is required on the part of all our educators, as hinted by my boss, the Secretary of Education, and especially at early childhood levels, are that our teachers must do thorough research that must be reinforced. As a former teacher, we do not need more on plenty. We do not need a new subject to tell us that we are living in Tobago. We are living here. We have to love what we have. We have to appreciate what we have. And we have to use it to teach our own children. So, Madam Presiding Officer, on that note, I would take my seat. And I would like to say that I am in total disagreement with the motion as presented by the member for Palliative Lansomi Speyside, and to let him know that Tobago teachers, we do not need more on plenty. Thank you.
This motion presented by my colleague Assemblyman Farley Augustine on behalf of the Minority Council is one that in essence demonstrates, as both of my colleagues have said, that the Progressive Democratic Patriots understands that holistic educational development for our island is critical. It shows that we understand the uniqueness of this island known as Tobago. And it shows that we want to ensure that every child who goes through our public education system learns about that uniqueness and is proud of that uniqueness. Madam Presiding Officer, it is a simple motion, and we should simply agree to move to implementation. This is a Tobago first motion, and I encourage all of us, Madam Presiding Officer, to do what is right, and to not just do what our political leaders tell us to do, but to think about what we will gain from this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when your grandchildren come up knowing that this is within our bowels, that being a Tobagonian is the best thing that you can be. Madam Presiding Officer, I ask all members to agree and pass the motion as is presented, because, as they said in the beginning, it really is a good motion.
We are in support of the spirit of the motion. We have no problems at all with the spirit of the motion. But where we do have a problem is in the resolution itself, which is asking us to create a subject, another subject, to an already overburdened curriculum. And we are simply saying this resolution is unnecessary. Unnecessary because at every level of the educational program, these things are catered for. Let me just retract a little before I go forward. Now, you have heard the Chief Secretary, and he gave you a lesson, or should I say a course in lesson planning. You have listened to my colleague, Assemblyman Marisha Osman, and she would have taken a very teacher-centric approach to the motion, and she would have given you a detailed snapshot of the primary school curriculum. What I would do for you this afternoon is look at the motion from the point of view of an administrator. Now, I have been in the teaching profession for more than 30 years as teacher and as administrator. So it's not necessary for me to repeat a lot of what was said before. Now, our concern with this motion is the fact that the Tobago House of Assembly is being mandated to add a subject, another subject to the curriculum. And my first question is, would adding another subject to the curriculum guarantee any measure of success? Because right now, there are so many subjects on the curriculum and students are failing. So what I choose to offer, as my colleagues have offered, is the fact that as the curriculum exists, it is enough. What is required is for the creativity and the passion of individual educators to take the existing curriculum to the level that we hope to achieve.
I need to wind up this motion. I need to wind up this motion by providing some clarity to some obvious misunderstandings. And I appreciate the overarching sentiment that we agree with the spirit of the motion. But I think what we are essentially doing via the amended version is to attenuate the motion into nothingness, water it down into nothingness. The motion, as on the other paper, in the preamble, acknowledges that we do have at present a national curriculum that allows for the inclusion of Tobago-centric information and sharing that in the most creative ways. And so the need to reiterate what's in the syllabus and the curriculum, that was unnecessary because the motion acknowledges that the current curriculum in all the forms allows for it. Now, what we are not getting is that we are speaking about the ideal when the ideal does not occur. At no point have I or any of my colleagues indicated that teachers are not doing what we are asking. What we are saying is that it's not being done sufficiently. What we are saying is that more has to be done. What we are also saying is that notwithstanding the fact that the national curriculum allows for this sort of creativity and innovation and idealism that we have been trumpeting, it is not happening sufficiently. I listened to the reading of the objectives for the lower school syllabus as Assemblyman Jack presented. And having just recently taught upper school, I could tell you, by the time they get to you, you want to know what has happened. How is it that they still don't have the kind of Tobago-centric information that they should have? And it means that it's either not being taught properly or it's not taught at all. There is a school of thought in education that says if nothing is learned, then nothing was taught. I don't know if I completely agree with that. But the point is, we have young people, notwithstanding the wideness and the full gambit of the curriculum from nursery to secondary, who are still leaving lower school, secondary school, and not being able to talk confidently about their island Tobago. So it have a problem. And I think to give some credit to the Honorable Chief Secretary, he did admit that we do have a problem in this regard, and that perhaps accountability might be part of the problem. He pointed out that perhaps it might be a case where teachers are not researchers, and they ought to be researchers if you are to be an effective teacher. He also explored the reality that some information is just simply difficult to acquire. And I am hoping that in creating this subject, what it forces us to do is to put systems in place to provide information, access to information to our teachers that they don't now have access to. And earlier on I spoke about my experience doing the research for Bishop's High School. And I could tell you that sometime tomorrow I have to walk through St. Andrew's Cemetery. So if you see me, don't think I work in OB or anything strange. But I have to walk through it because here is a school, a house called Reed. Most people don't even know the man's first name. I spoke to top members of the Anglican clergy. They shocked when I call the first name to them. We don't know when he was born. We don't know when he died. But he's a pillar of one of our foremost secondary schools. And this says something about how we as an island have been treating with our heritage, with our history, with our culture. That we haven't been doing enough to document in a very formal way. And I agree. The informal things are what we remember most. The informal things are usually the funny things, are usually things that you can call up an old school friend and talk about and laugh. Those are the things you remember most. But the disadvantage of not codifying these things very formally is that they tend to get lost. Because those of us who remember the jokes, we will one day die. And then what? And that is, to me, the bane of this contention. We also heard that the motion is a case of more upon plenty. And I must say, Assemblyman Osmond, you sound just like I expect most teachers to respond to this motion. Just too much work. But I don't know ever, if there was ever a time in the history of this country where there was curriculum change, curriculum input, subject change, subject input, that teachers did not make the excuse that this is more on plenty. That teachers didn't say, you want to kill me now, we must do all of this now. So I don't know that that age-old excuse is sufficient to say we should not provide this as a new subject. The motion also went to great pains, and perhaps unnecessarily so, to state some of the very obvious things such as the need to use modern teaching techniques and the field trips and the arts to teach Tobago's culture and history. And the reason that was purposefully done is because we don't envision this subject to be a subject being taught the traditional way. And let's explore what that traditional way looks like. As beautiful as the national curriculum sounds, many teachers, not all, many teachers will just get to the classroom, grab an assigned text that the ministry would have approved, have children read the assigned text, test them on that assigned text, and by the time a national or regional exam comes around, they can pass it because the children can regurgitate some information from that assigned text, when the reality is those assigned texts, they don't give us sufficient information about Tobago's history and heritage and culture.
Members, we have 2 amendments proposed before we put the question. The first amendment is that we delete, be it resolved that this House mandate the Division of Education, Innovation and Energy to construct an appropriately named subject with varying levels, which will specifically incorporate Tobago's environment, history, heritage, culture, and governance. And that it be replaced with, be it resolved that the education of our students in Tobago be grounded in the knowledge of and appreciation for the historical, environment, socio-cultural, and political reality of Tobago. All in favor of the amended version? Aye. All against? Any abstain? Anyone abstaining?
Yes.
Okay. The ayes have it. We will have the amended motion in there. The second amendment being proposed, be it further resolved that beginning in the 2019-2020 academic year, this subject becomes mandatory for all Tobago pupils or students enlisted at government and government-assisted schools between nursery school and lower secondary school, and be taught using a combination of modern teaching techniques, the arts, and field trips. This is recommended to be deleted and to be replaced by, and be it further resolved that the implementation of the curriculum in all our schools reflect effective and deliberate use of resources and stimuli that are based primarily on our Tobago context, but must be sufficiently flexible to incorporate national, regional, and international realities. All in favor of the amended version? Aye. Any against? Anyone abstaining? Yes. Okay. The ayes have it for the amended version. Honorable members, the question now being put. Whereas the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996 in its 5th schedule lists education, including curriculum, as a responsibility of the THA. And whereas Tobago subscribes to a national curriculum that originates from the Ministry of Education in Trinidad and that aims to translate national development goals to a classroom instruction. And whereas Tobago's environment, history, heritage, governance, and culture can and should be incorporated into the delivery of lessons by representative teachers. And whereas having pupils or students knowledgeable of Tobago's environment, history, heritage, governance, and culture is critical to Tobago's thrust for greater autonomy and developing its tourism sector, among other industries. Be it resolved that the education of our students in Tobago be grounded in the knowledge of and appreciation for the historical, environmental, socio-cultural, and political reality of Tobago. And be it further resolved that the implementation of the curriculum in all our schools reflect effective and deliberate use of resources and stimuli that are based primarily on our Tobago context, but must be sufficiently flexible to incorporate national, regional, and international realities. All in favor of the motion put, the question put, say aye. Aye. Any against? Any abstaining? The motion is carried.